welcome back to a new video. In this video, we're going to put together a small application using the Pokemon API. We're going to learn how to do routing using React Router DOM. We're going to use Tailwind to work on the CSS. And we're going to be using the Poke API. So we can get started looking at the API documentation and put together a small mini project. Before we begin, let's take a look at the application, how it's going to look at the end. So here we're going to have a page where we're going to have different links to the name of the Pokemon you want to get more details on. So basically the application is just a simple application that is going to read some data from a third-party API, the Poke API. We're going to list the Pokemon names. There's a lot more names in this. I just limit them to 100. But you can get all Pokemon names. You can click on the names. This will take you to a separate page where you're going to have the details about the Pokemon. It's going to look similar to like a Pokemon card. And the user can see some of the information here about the Pokemon. You can go back here in the back button and click on another Pokemon. As you saw in there, there's a little Pokemon logo while the data is loading. So we're going to handle that as well. Here you can see another Pokemon. And then here you can keep clicking on your favorite ones as well. So now that we have in mind a little bit of how the application is going to look, let's take a look here at a flow chart that I put together here. So here is how this is going to work. We're going to have a app component, which is going to handle our routes. We're going to have our main route or the root route, which is just /, which is going to render the Pokemon list component. And here's where we're going to list all the Pokemon names inside of a link. So the user can click on one of these. And then that is going to change the path of, the link is going to have a path to /Pokemon / and then we're going to use the name of the Pokemon at the end. And then that's going to match a second route, which is going to have the path of /Pokemon / and then we're going to have a parameter here, which is going to be the Pokemon name, which we're going to grab here inside of the Pokemon details. So we can make a fetch request to our API to get more information about the specific Pokemon that the user clicked on. So basically this parameter, we're going to call it Pokemon name, but at the end it's going to have the value of either Pikachu, Ivysaur, whatever Pokemon they click on. So there's Bulbasaur, there's just a few names so you can see a few examples. So we're going to have that name available here in this parameter. We're going to make a second fetch request, and then we're going to have a loading screen. So while the data gets before the data comes back, we're going to show a loading message or a logo of the Pokemon logo while it's loading. And then after we get the data back, we're going to show the information about the Pokemon or the Pokemon card. We're going to create a little Pokemon card. So while we're making the request, we're going to set a little state variable that while it's loading, while that's true, we're going to show the loading. And after we get the data back, we set that back to false, and then we should see the Pokemon card being rendered with all the Pokemon information that we need. So let's take a quick look at the Pokemon API. And again, in the video description, you have the link to this Notion guide, where you're going to have all the links here to the code sandbox, Pokemon API, Tailwinds, and React Router documentation. And I will also add React icons, which we're going to also use in this project. So going back to the Pokemon API, we can see here that we have a URL where we can make a request, so we can get some information about a specific Pokemon. So we need to make a GET request to this URL later on, so we can get some information here. The abilities, the name, there's going to be a different type of information here. So actually this is a lot of information in here. You can build pretty much a game based on this API. But for the most part, we're going to go to the documentation. And here we're going to look into the Pokemon here, where we're going to be able to get some more information about the abilities of the Pokemon. So we can grab some information from here and we can display this information in the application. So we'll come back to this in a second. So for now, let's just go into the information here at the top again. So let's say you're brand new to working with APIs. So first you find the API, you gotta make sure that your API read through the documentation to see if it's gonna have the information that you need and if it's free and how you can get access to this API. So this API is completely free. We don't need to register. We just have to make a request. They have a Slack channel that you can join if you want. They have different libraries for you here. If you're using different programming languages, we're just going to use the Fetch API to make our own fetch requests. And you can see that here we can limit the amount of Pokemons that we get or responses, so how many sources you want to get back. You can implement different functionalities in your application, and we are going to inspect a little bit different endpoints. I think we're going to use 2 different endpoints to complete this application. So let's get started, and little by little we're going to come back to the API so we can make some GET requests so we can get some data. So to get started, let's click on the Code Sandbox Starter link here. And we're going to start looking at this page right over here. We can get rid of, this already has the CDM to the, where is it, to the Tailwind framework here. So we can use Tailwinds from inside of application already. In the app.js, we can get rid of this import here. We don't have any styles there. And we can also get rid of these H2 3s down here. So we can start putting together our application. All right, so the first thing we're going to do in the app component, let's work on setting up our routing. So we're going to add to the dependencies here. We're going to look for React Router DOM, this one here. And that should install React Router version 6 point something here. So that's fine. We can work with that. So first, let's take a quick look at the React Router documentation. You have the link in here. React Router docs. So we're going to use the browser router component here. So we can wrap our application into the router so we can use the different components like routes to create many routes or the single route as well. So you can look into the browser router. We can see how we can import this into our app. So we can go back to the app component here, and then we can go into index.js, and now here we can import from React Router DOM. We're going to need here the browser router, and we're just going to rename it as router. So this is just renaming it, but it works the same way. In here, we need to wrap our app component here with inside of the router, right? We don't need to rename it here, but a lot of developers, they rename this component. So we're just gonna do it as well. So in case you see it later, now you know that is the same thing. So let's just wrap this here with the router. Right, and as soon as we do that, we can double check the developer tools here. We can see that now the application is wrapping to the browser router. In here, we got some navigation provider, and we got the location provider that we can use in the application. So in here, This is pretty much everything we need in the index so we can have our router wrapping our application. Now we can come back to the app component. In the app component, we're going to need to import from React router DOM again. Let's put the curly brackets here. React dash router DOM. Here we're going to need to import routes, which is the component that is going to allow us to create or to declare different routes. And then we're also going to need a single route that is going to allow us to declare single routes inside of the application. So just like they do in here, we're going to go back into our app. We're also going to import the single routes because we need this one as well. And right under the H1, we can call the routes component. And here we can start declaring different routes for our application. So the first route we're going to declare is going to be the root route or the main route. So we're going to use the routes component. And this one is going to be single close. We're going to close it in the same line. Notice the other one, the routes in plural, is in opening and closing because it needs to wrap every single route that you declare here. So for the route, we need to specify the path, and this one's just going to be /. And then we need to tell which component we want to render inside of the route. So there's another prop here called the element, and the element we can pass in a component name or the component we want to render. So before we can pass anything here, let's create inside of the source file, let's create a new folder. Let's call this one components. And inside components, we're going to create, let's go back here. We're still working in the apps. We're going to create the Pokemon list and then the Pokemon details. So let's start with the Pokemon list component. So here, let's create a new file, Pokemon list.js. And here we're just going to start by defining a function called Pokemon list. And let's just return the name for now. So in H1, this says Pokemon list. So we can just continue with the routing, and then we'll come back and work on this component. Export default at the bottom. Come on, Pokemon list. All right, so here, now that we have this component here, we can import that one inside of the app component. So import, or we can just say, we can just call this component here now. We can say Pokemon list, and this is going to automatically import the component here for you. If it didn't do it, just import the component here, just like I have in line 2. So now we have set up our routing. So first we wrap our application inside of the browser router, which we renamed to router. That's the first step. Second step is come back to the app.js, and then we need to import routes and also routes. And then inside routes, which is a opening and closing component, and we need to call it like that, we need to declare all the routes inside of these routes component using the single routes component here. And then we need to specify the path where this component needs to be rendered. So every time you visit this path here on your browser right now, that's where we are in / right here. This is the main route. You're going to see the Pokemon list, and we can see the title here, the H1 that we added to the Pokemon list component, right? You can see that here already being displayed here. But if you are in another one, let's say some other path here, and hit enter, right, you don't see that component there, because what React Router is going to do is going to look at the URL of the browser where you're located, and it's going to try to match one of those paths to one of these routes that you have here, and if the path matches, it's going to render that component there. So if we go back to use / here, we see the Pokemon list here again. All right, so the next step, let's make a first request so we can get some data. We're going to grab the data. We're going to make a fetch request. As soon as we load up the app, we're going to make a fetch request. So let's import here at the top. Let's import use state and also use effect from React. So we can go and make some requests to the Pokemon API. So in here, we can remove this text Y from here if you want. We can add that a little later. That way we don't miss any text in the white parts of the application. So looking back at the API, so let's go back to the documentation on the API. We need to make a request to this endpoint in here. So we could make a fetch request. We can use this one, but this one's for the ability. Let's look for the one that is just all the information. I think that was at the beginning. So let me hit back. In here is just the main link here, so we could just grab this link here, right? If we open this in another tab, we can see a example of the data here. So we could just grab this from here without the Pokemon name. Let's just grab everything here except for the / and the name. So copy that. And in here, so even in here, you can try that out. If you make the request without the Pokemon name here and hit submit, you're going to get a array, right? You're going to have a count, a next property, previous, and then a result, which is going to have, you can limit this to a different amount. Here it comes with 20. So you're going to have 20 different Pokemons here with the name and the URL for one of those images. So in here, let's go back to the app and let's work on the use effect in here. So inside this use effect, we're going to, let's pass in the callback function here. And let's pass in an empty array. We just want to run this code in here the first time our component mounts. So inside of the callback, let's define a async function. Let's call this one fetch data. And then inside of this function, we're going to make the get request. So let's say const response equals await fetch, and then here we're going to paste the URL where we want to get our Pokemon from. And in here, if you make the request here, you could get a lot of names. I think the default, I think I saw it was 20 items, but you could limit this to any amount you want. So you can set a parameter here, so !limits, and set that equals to 10, for example. So that way we only get 10. So let's see what else we need to do here. So after we make the request here, we're going to say const data, we're going to await, we're going to parse the res.json data that we're going to receive in the response, and then let's just console.log the data to see if the information is coming back. And then after the function definition here, we can call the I think this is misspelled here. use effect, and then console.log, and then after the function definition there, we can call the fetch data function so we can see some data coming back. Let's go to the console to see if we see any information coming back. So here we see the same object we saw in the documentation here, where we receive in the account the link to request more Pokemon. So you can in here get 20 and then make another request to get 20 more. But we limit this to 10 so we can have a smaller amount first, and then we can change that if we want. Here we see the same. This is all the Pokemons that are returning. We limit that to 10. So in this array here, this array is called results. We have 10 items in there. And each one of those items is going to be a different Pokemon name and URL. So let's create a state here. So when that data is ready, so we're going to say const, we're going to create a state variable called Pokemons, and the function set Pokemons. We're going to set that to use state. We can initialize that to null. And in here, after the data comes back, we can call the set Pokemons and pass in the data dot results, which it should be this array right over here with the 10 items. So we put that into the state. And now after we put this into the state, the data, we can look at the dev tools here. We can click on app over here. Let me refresh this to see if it works. There we go, click on app. And then in the state, we're gonna see that we have 10 objects. So the 10 Pokemon that came back, and now we put it into the state. And every time we update the state, your component re-renders, and now we can work on displaying the Pokemon's data that we have in the state. So now we could pass this information. I don't want to map over the Pokemon's array in the app component. I want to do that inside of the Pokemon list. So this Pokemon's array, let's just pass it down to a prop called Pokemons and pass in the variable with the data Pokemons in here. So now we pass down the Pokemon's array to the Pokemon list via props. The props has the same name, Pokemon. So if we click on Pokemon list here, we can see in the props we have a prop key called Pokemons, which is the same data. We're just passing it down to this Pokemon list here so we can work on mapping over the data. So in here, let's see what we're going to do inside of this component here. So inside of the list, we're going to basically map over the data, and we want to render a link component which comes from React Router DOM, and that way we can route the user to a new page. If we look back at the diagram here, so we already work on getting the data inside of the app component. We're passing it down to the Pokemon list so we can do the mapping. We're going to map over the data. We're going to render a link tag for each one of those Pokemon, so we're going to have 10. And each of those links, if the user clicks on one of those, is going to take the user to the Pokemon details page. So this is treated as a page, kind of like a page. Is a route, is its own route, and this is kind of a different page. So this Pokemon list is nested, but is right now is serving kind of like its own purpose of being the being rendered in the root route. So later when the user clicks on one of those links, is going to route them to this path, which is going to match another path that we're going to create in the app component, and then we will render the Pokemon details inside of there. So we'll get there pretty soon. Let's work on rendering the links here. So we working on this left hand side first. So let's render the links in the Pokemon list right over here. So let's import the link tag that we need. We need a link component, which comes also from React Router DOM. So all the routing in the front end is done via React Router DOM because we don't want to refresh the page. We don't want to make another request. This link tag works kind of like an anchor tag, but it makes sure we don't refresh the page because we're working on a single page application right now. So in here, let's start by receiving the Pokemons via props. It's coming in from this prop here, Pokemon. So we received that here. Now we should have Pokemons available in here. So all we need to do here is pretty much, let's get rid of this H1. Let's have parentheses here. Let's have a div right over here. And inside of this div, all I need to do is let's have an H1. Let's have an H1 here that will say something like choose your Pokemon, right? Something like this. All right, we can see the text here. So now that we have the text here, we could map over the data. So here, let's have a different div so we can do the map over the data in here. So we're going to say, let's start with curly brackets, and we're going to make sure first that we have Pokemons. So if Pokemons is true, right? So if it's true, then do the following, which is going to be the mapping over. And make sure this is Pokemon. So here we'll use the short circuit to make sure that we have that this value is true. So make sure we got the data, and then if it's true, we're going to use the Pokemons, and we're going to use the map method to grab each Pokemon. And then for each Pokemon, we're going to, let's put another parenthesis here. And inside the parentheses, we're going to have another div like this. And in here, let's do, let's render the link component. So we're going to have a link component, which is the one we import at the top. Let's close it right over here. And in here, let's display the Pokemon name. So curly brackets, let's use the Pokemon. So single Pokemon that we use it inside of the map. And then we're going to access the dot name property. And right away, you can see some Pokemon names. And if you hover over them, you can see the indicator changes, because now you can click on these because these are link tags. So right now we have our list of names, which each one for the thing we need to set now is where these links are going to take us. So right now we can set a property here, the to property, which will indicate this link, where do we want to navigate, where we want to go in this app. So the place that we want to go, like we saw here in this here, is to / Pokemon, and then we're going to use the name of the Pokemon to route to each one of these. So we're going to have a / Pokemon Pikachu or any other Pokemon here. So here, let's use actually in here curly brackets, so we can use backticks and say we want to take the user to / Pokemon / and then we can pass in the name of the Pokemon here also. So we can say Pokemon dot name and save. So now this link should take the user to /Pokemon, and then it's going to use the name of each one of these Pokemon so we can navigate. So if we click on, let's say Squirtle here, you click on that, now you can see the path has changed. Now it says Pokemon / and then the name of the Pokemon. We're doing it this way so we can grab the name of the Pokemon here later using the parameters object in another page where we're going to make another request to get all the information about this specific Pokemon that the user clicked on. So let's go back, let's delete this / Pokemon here. Let's go back to just the / and we have all the names here. Let's add a little bit of styling here. So let's see if we have, let's go to this H1 and let's use Tailwind so we can add some class names here. So if you're brand new to Tailwind, you can go into the documentation here and search for anything that you want to do. Let's say you want to set the font size. You search for fonts, and it's going to say font weight, font size, font style, and then you can click on that and it's going to give you different classes for the size that you want to apply. So if you set a class of text -XS, is going to set the font size to 12 pixels or 0.7 rem. So right now we want to, let's see what we have here. So class name, let's just do the font -bold to make this darker. And I do want to set the color back to white, I believe. Let's set this to white. So text -white is that sometimes if you have a white background and then you have the white text set all the way here, sometimes you don't see the text. So let's just set it here for now. You just got to remember that I set that here and then change it. So now this is font bold, so now it's a little bit darker here. Let's put some margin at the bottom, so NB-5, so we can push down the names here a little bit. And then let's see what we want here. So the names right now, they one on top of the other one. So into this div is because we wrap the link inside of this div. So we can, to the div, we could add a, here we could do a, let's use the class name again to set the class flex. So we set this to flex. So this div, oh, come on, get updated. So let's see, this one is flex in here. No, I just want to add it, not here, but let's add it to this parent div here. There we go. Now everything is in a row. We want to use flex. Let's use flex wrap so we can wrap the names. So it just looks a little bit nicer and more responsive for now. Let's see what else we need here. So to this div here, the inside, let's add some spaces to this. So let's see what we can do here. Let's add, okay, so let's go here and let's set the class name. And in here, come on, let's set the margin left and right to -5 of this div. Class name is a capital N. There we go. Now we need to, let's do a hover effect. So we can just set the hover here, colon, and we can set with that when we hover on one of these, we want to set a shadow, a box shadow of MD, of medium. And then we want to also on hover, we want to set the shadow to white. So let's say if we hover over these, you can see a little bit of shadow, back shadow, and is white. We also want to set, let's set the padding. So P-2 will add some padding to these so it looks a little bit nicer. Also, let's see what else we can set here. Let's see. After the P2, let's see if we want to make the text a little bigger. So hover colon text dash XL. Let's see if we goes up a bit here. Hover text. Maybe we can add it to the actual link in here. Yeah, we can remove this one here. And these are optional. We just want to add a little bit of styling so we can have a nicer development and UI for the user. So to the link here, let's add some styles here after the to property. Let's add the class name, and let's add some text dash yellow. This is how you can set the color, and then we can set a shade of 300. And let's take a look here. Let's go back. I clicked on one of them. All right, we can see the yellow color. Let's add a font dash bold here as well. Let's capitalize them, capitalize, so we can make them capitalize. And let's just do a hover here. Let's just do an underline. So underline right over here. So on hover. There we go. That's good enough. That's looks nice. I think that's the same thing I have in the complete one. All right, so right now we got the link. So right now, when we click on one of these links to see more details about these Pokemons here, if we click here, it's gonna take us here. Right now we don't see any component being rendered, because if we go back to app.js, we don't have any routes that matches this here. So now we need to declare a new route and then pass in the component that we want to render there. So for that, we're going to create a Pokemon details component. So in components, let's create a new file. Let's call this one Pokemon details.js. Let's create our function. Let's return. Let's have a div here right away, because we need to do a lot of work in here. Let's just have a h1 for now that is going to say Pokemon details. And then let's export this. So export default, Pokemon details. Cool. So we have the component that we want to render in the new route. So now back to app component, we can declare a new route in here, right? So we declare all the routes inside of routes. In here, we're going to say singular route, self-closing, and then we need to set the path. And then the path here, we can declare the some parameters. So the parameters is going to be these values here, this name of the Pokemon. We're going to access that as a parameter to this page location. So we can say in here /Pokemon, which is the beginning of the path here. And then you can do / Pokemon name, and this is kind of like a variable that we're going to be able to access from inside of this page later on, which is going to have the name of the specific Pokemon that the user clicked on back on the Pokemon list. So here we want to set the element or the component to show that it will be the Pokemon details page component, and make sure the Pokemon details is imported here at the top. So now you can see we have the H1 here being rendered, Pokemon details, which is coming from your Pokemon details component. Right, so now we have set the two routes that we need. We have the root or the main route, which is going to render the Pokemon list. And inside the Pokemon list, we have all the links. And then those links are going to navigate the user to this new path. And then we're going to be able to access the Pokemon name and do some more logic inside of the Pokemon's details component. So let's go back to the Pokemon details component. And inside here, we're going to fetch some data again from the Pokemon or Poke API. So now we access some data from this this URL /Pokemon, which returns all the Pokemon that you want. You can limit those again. But now if we go to check out the documentation, we can see that we can also have more information about the different things in pretty much the Pokemon land, right? There's different values for if you want to implement like the games from Pokemon's, but you're going to have Pokemon's details down here, and you're going to have their abilities. So we could make a request to any of these endpoints. So a little later, if you want to create something, a new feature on the application, you can use any of these information here to either get more information or even implement a whole entire game based on this API if you want. So based on the information that we need, if we take a quick look back at the beginning of the documentation here, if we make a request here again to one of the Pokemon names, you're going to see that we do have the abilities if we have the name. So if you just make a request to /Pokemon, you only get, for example, Pokemon again, you get the array with the 20 different Pokemons. But if you go again /Pikachu, for example, and make that request, you're going to have data about this specific Pokemon. So you're going to have abilities, you're going to have different forms, the height, you're going to have more the sprites, like some images, and the weight. So we're going to use this information here. So we're just going to use this URL with the Pokemon names so we can grab this information that we see here. So back in the app, we want to do that in the Pokemon details. As soon as the user gets to this page that we have the Pokemon name here, we want to make a new fetch request. So let's import useState and useEffect again. From React. And then we're also going to need the use params from React Router DOM, so we can access the parameter that we created back in the app.js. So we can access this parameter here. Remember, this creates a parameter key, and we can access that. I can show you that here. So in this page, if you click on one of the Pokemons here, you can actually see some values here. If you look at the props, you can look at value. You can see we have base name, navigator. We have, where's this located again? Location. We have path name. Where is it? Where did it go? Let's click on Pokemon details here. Let's see, Pokemon details. Let's see, it's not showing right now, but I'll show you in a second. I'll console log it and show you here. So in Pokemon details, let's grab the Pokemon name. Let's do here, let's create a const. We're gonna destructure from use param. So use param is going to give us access to the parameters on this page, right? So we're going to call use params in here, and then we have access to the parameters that are inside of the URL at the top. And the parameter that we have access to is this one here, Pokemon name. Pokemon name is going to be this name here. So let's just destructure Pokemon name. And then down here, let's just console log it so we can see it. Pokemon name, right? So we just console log this key that we destructure from the params object here. So now, if we look at the console, you can see here that we have the name of the Pokemon we clicked on. So if we go back, actually we can create a back button using a link so we don't have to keep changing the URL. If I click on another Pokemon here, Squirtle, you can see the name here, and then we can see the name console log here as well. So before we fetch the data, let's get rid of this warning here. So it says each child in the list, it needs a unique identifier. So that is coming from because we have the Pokemon list here. And because we're listing all of these links here, it wants us to have a key prop on those. So the key prop, let's just use inside of the div here. So inside of this div that we render, let's add a key prop here. So let's say key, and let's use the Pokemon. I think we have a Pokemon name. We can use the Pokemon name as well here. So I don't think we have an ID in here. No, we only have a name and URL. So yeah, let's add the key prop with the Pokemon name. So that way we get rid of that warning. So if we refresh here, and even if we go back to just / we don't see that warning anymore. And also in Pokemon details, let's bring in the link. And we can use a link to go back, right? We could create a link. Yeah, I think that's easy enough. So after, like at the top of Pokemon details, let's see, let's have, so that's when we click on one of these, right? It's gonna show up here. We can have a link that is just going to say back, and then the to property could just be /. So now if we click back here, it takes us back to the main route, and then we can go back and navigate a little bit easier than before. All right, so what's next? All right, so now we have the Pokemon name that we want to get the data from inside of the Pokemon detail. So let's go back at the diagram here. We work on the app, we work on the Pokemon list, we have the different links which are pointing to a Pokemon details page, and we have that parameter with the name of the Pokemon here. So here now we're going to use that name to make another request to the Pokemon Poke API to get information about the specific Pokemon that we want. So we can delete this console log. We know we're getting that information there. Let's work on setting the use effect, passing the callback function, and passing the empty array. And here we're going to, let's create another async function. Let's say, let's call this one fetch details. And then we're going to say const res equals await fetch. And then we're going to make a fetch request to the same one we're doing here. So we can copy this all the way up to Pokemon here. We can go back to Pokemon details, and here we can use backticks to go here, and then we're going to say $, curly brackets, and then we're going to pass in the Pokemon name that we want to use. So that's, whoops, that's not what I want. Whoops, I messed that up. I meant to say copy. I think I pasted it instead and pass it right there. So now we have the URL that we want to make the request from. And now this is dynamic because every time the user clicks on this and this Pokemon name is going to change, it's going to be a different one. And we're going to make that request asking for the specific Pokemon information. So after this fetch request, we can just do const data equals await, so we can parse the data that came back in the response. And then we can, let's console.log data, so we can look at the data. And then we can call fetch details right after the function. And then here we have a warning here that we have a missing dependency Pokemon name. We need to pass in the Pokemon name to this dependency array because now this use effect depends on this Pokemon name, the Pokemon name. So this use effect needs to run every time this Pokemon name changes here. So we just pass it here and that warning goes away. So now let's see if we click on one of these components, Pokemons, and I don't see anything happening here. Let's go back. Let's refresh this browser. Click on a Pokemon. Oh, I need to go to console. Oh no, I'm in console. What's going on here? Let's see. Use effects. We call in fetch details. And then this is making the await fetch to this endpoint. We wait for the parsing of the data. We console log data, but it's not. Let's see if Pokemon details is being displayed. We got Pokemon details. I don't see the console log. Let's click on Pokemon details. We have the use effect there. We have the params here now it's showing. We have some information. We had the parameter here, the Pokemon name that we're using. But I don't see this console log yet. Let me see if I'm missing something here. Function, call it. No, everything looks fine to me. Okay, let's create a use state here. So const, let's go with this one, details. This is where we're gonna put the information, set details from the information. So when it comes back, let's see if we put it in here. Let's go use state. Let's initialize this to null because we don't have any information right now. But when we finally have some data, let's try to see if setting this up, set details. And I think I misspelled details here. So set details and set details here. Come on. And then let's pass in the data here. Right, so after we get the data from the API about this Pokemon, we're going to console log it and we're going to put into the state. Let's see if we can see it if we refresh this here. If I go to developer tools, Pokemon details, we have state is null, so something is wrong here. Let's see, Pokemon app, we have the Pokemon details, Pokemon name. Right, that's fine because we can see this information here. But the use effect is not working. Let me see if it's my browser. Let me give it a refresh because sometimes CodeSandbox just crashes for some reason. Let me look at the console here. and this is the array, but if I go and click on one of these, I still don't see in here. Okay, so let's see. I think is probably here. So I think I'm missing a / here. There we go. Yeah, but I was missing a / here to have the URL. So if you look at the URL after Pokemon, there's a / and then the name of the Pokemon. That's what I was missing there. So now we got some information. We got an object with the abilities. There's an abilities array with 2 objects. There is a forms with some forms of the Pokemon, a height, an ID, moves, a lot of moves. If you want to display all of those, species, sprites, images, and then we have the weight as well. So now we have all the information we need. If we want here, we could start rendering the information about the Pokemon. So let's try to work on loading this, setting the loading information here. Or actually, let's just display some basic information that we get here. So let's see what we can display really quick, just to see something on the screen. So if we have here, we have all this information available. So down here, let's just do a curly brackets, and then we're gonna check if details is true. So if we got some details, let's just display here a h2. This is just for testing. We'll change this in a second. And let's do keep misspelling this, details, and then details dot heights. I believe there was a height. So the height is 7 of the Bulbasaur Pokemon. So we look at the abilities here, see the height is 7. So the data is there. Before we continue rendering all that data, let's work on setting up a loading state to see when the data is being to show something while the data is loading. So if it's loading, well, we get the response back. We're going to show a loading component. If it's not loading, we're just going to show the Pokemon car. So let's work on that first. So back in Pokemon details here, let's see, let's work on a new component. Let's call this component loading.js. This loading component is just going to display a Pokemon logo for us. So let's do a small function here. Let's just export default function. This is a small one, so we're just going to export that one at the top. So the function name is going to be loading. This is the name of the component, and then here we just want to return a div, and inside the div I want to render a icon. So we're gonna use the React icons library. So remember, those links are in the Notion page here. So we're gonna use React icons. If you were working on a local computer, you can use npm to install this. But since we're in Code Sandbox, we're just going to add in here. Let's search for React-icons, and then a React icons right over here. And now that we have this new dependency here, we can go into this page here of the React icons. So we can search for the Pokemon icons that we want. So we can search for Pokemon here. This is gonna give us back 4, and these are from different libraries. So there's the different packages. So the different icons packages here, like font awesome 5, 6, and then there's material icon, iconic cons. There's different ones here. So you just look for something that you want, and then you can click on the one that you want. This is kind of like the Pokemon logo, and we can import this. This is gonna copy the name for you. So we can go back to the loading and we can import this. We can say import curly brackets from React icons, and then we can pass in the icon name that we're looking for. In the documentation, they show you how to do this too. So again, if you're working on a local project, you can install this using this command, npm install React icons. And then you can import the one that you want from specifying the library that you want. So this is from Font Awesome. The one we're looking for is SE, which should be simple icons, SE. So we can come back here and then we can do /SE. And then here we can display this name of the icon that we want to display, like so, and that should give us something. So we can set the size in here, but let's see this is working first. And by going back to Pokemon details, in Pokemon details, let's just display this here. So let's say loading in here. And right now, oh yeah, it's right over there, really small. So let's set this size to like 400. There we go. All right, let's use that one. That's fine. But I also want to make sure that when this is displayed, so what we're going to do is that we want to make sure, we want to check if we don't have any details yet. So we can set a exclamation here. So there's no details. We want to show, so we can change this double end sign to a question mark. So if there's no details, we want to show the loading component, which is this one. Let's move it in here. Else we want to show the height. And if we go back to here and then we click on one of these, you're going to see the Pokemon logo for a couple of seconds, and then you're going to see the data. So now we come back again, click on another Pokemon, we see the logo and it disappears. So when it shows the logo by itself, let's just make sure this logo is being displayed on the whole, in the center, kind of like in the center of the page. So let's go back to the div here. We'll set the class name. Let's just use flex, and then center everything by setting items to center, and then making the justify dash content, not justify center, to center everything. So if you are looking for what am I doing here, how do I know to write these classes, you can go back to the Tailwind documentation. You can search here for flex. So in flexbox and grid section, so right now we setting the flex class into the loading component. So here you can see how this works. So by setting something to flex, you make that a flex container. So you can have the flex direction. Right now we're doing the items, justify content. We set it to center, which is going to set the justify content to center. We also set the items. Where's my items? Justify items, no. Align items, that center. This is the one we use. So it just aligns everything to the center. So here you can look at the different classes depending on what you want to do. Here we see the flex wrap that we added to the Pokemon list component. So going back to here, I also, let's see, want to add a little animation. So right now, if we go back to here and click on another one, you saw that now it was in the center. But I also want to set the animate value, animate to dash and bounce. So when we click on one of these, that was too quick. Click on this, that's too quick. Right, let's just display the loading here so we can see it before anyways here, so we can see what's going on. So if I click here again, this is what I'm trying to show you. It just bounces up and down. So that's just want to say that's what it's supposed to be shown here, but it's kind of quick, so we don't get to see it. So on the Tailwinds, you can search for animate, and then animation. In the animation section, you can have there's some pre-built. You can add more if you want. There's spin, there's ping, pose, and bounce. So we can change that here if you want to see it. Loading instead of bounce, we can set that to ping. Just gonna do that. It's kind of cool. We can also set pose. This is gonna be like this, or we can do what was the other one? Let's go back real quick. Spin. I don't think spin is gonna do the trick here. Spin. It could be. Why not? But in here, just gonna leave it to bounce. Feel free to stay with the one you like. And then let's change the text to yellow-300, which I think matches a little bit of the Pokemon color. So how did I pick that color? I search here for colors. Customization, background color maybe. I think it's all the way at the top here. Colors. So colors, the one I'm using is yellow-300. So this yellow right over here. Again, feel free to add any colors you like, and you can change the colors even if you want to your own custom colors. So right now, this is what we have. What else do I want to add here? I think that's good for now. Let's go back to the details so we can start rendering some data. So let's close the loading, and then let's remove this loading from here. So that way we only show the loading when this is loading the information. So for a quick second or two, you will see that, and then it's gonna go away. So what this is false. So while we don't have any details, show the loading. As soon as we got the information, just show the details here. But for the details, we want to show more than just the height. So let's create a brand new component here. Let's create a Pokemon car. This is the last component we're gonna build. Here's what we're gonna detail every single thing about the Pokemon. So create Pokemon car component here. In here, let's set the return to return. Let's have a div here. And now let's make sure we export default Pokemon car. There we go. It removed my curly things here. So in here, so for the Pokemon car, now we have all this data available here. If we open up the abilities object here, we can see we have the base experience, the different forms. If you open that up, it's going to give you the different forms that the specific Pokemon can have. We can use the height, we can use the name, of course, species. We can use the height and then the sprites as well. So there's different sprites and images that we can use to display the Pokemon image coming right up. So back in here, let's start by displaying some information about the Pokemon at the top. So let's have a main div again, right? So after this main div in here, let's display the name and experience. In here, let's make that a comment. So we just want to divide because we're going to display a few things here. So in here, let's wrap this into another div so we can separate a few things here. So here, let's start by, we need to receive, so this Pokemon card, we're going to render that here. So we need to pass in the details, right? So we're going to pass the details. We need to receive the details here. And then in there, we're going to display the name of the Pokemon. Let's destructure some of the things here from details because it's going to be better. So let's say const curly brackets equals details. And let's get the name of the Pokemon and display it in here. Name. Right, let's start with that. Let's start with that so we can see the Pokemon card being rendered. So right now, let's go back to Pokemon details, and instead of the H2 here, let's render Pokemon card. Whoops, I messed that up. Pokemon card, and in a prop code details, let's pass the detail state variable here. Right over here with the same name as the prop. Now we can see the name right over here. Right after Pokemon details, we see the Pokemon name. Now we can continue working on the Pokemon card to build this up. So after the name, let's have a div here where we want to display. Inside of that div, we want to display let's have a spawn here. And let's display the, let's say, HP is going to be the base experience. Let's destructure base underscore experience, which is coming from the details object. Let's try to render that here. Here's giving me an error. Let's close this span in here. This is not being displayed. Let me take a look at the abilities here. So base experience. Oh, okay, of course, it's not gonna show. So let me just type this. In here, there we go. So now we can see it. Double check those names because we have underscores and we need to spell those right. So now we have the HP and we have the name. So right now we have name here and the HP here. Using this div, let me see which div do we wrap everything in. So let's put some space here. So here we have actually let's get rid of this div. Here's what we're gonna do. Let's have actually let's get rid of the name here. Let's cut that so we can put into an H2. And this closing div here, let's put it down here, right? And then let's just have this into an h2, because we can put that into an h2, the name, like so. So we have now this div here, right? We're just wrapping the h2, and then this is into its own div, because here now I can style this here using the class name. Let's set this to flex, so it can be right next to each other. Let's do a margin pattern of 2 pixels, so we can have some padding at the bottom. To the name, to the h2, let's add a class name, and let's use the capitalize. We can capitalize the name. We can set the font to bold, and then here we can set a text to the h2. So let's set the text property, where's the t? Text to 3XL, so we can make that way bigger. To this div here, let's just add a class name of margin left dash, let's do auto here. Yeah, so it can go all the way to the right hand side. All right, so I think that's the top of the car there. All right, for now that looks okay. What else we need here? So right after this, let's display some more information here. Let's display the image. So let's say image. Just trying to separate all this stuff by sections like this. So in the image here, let's have another div here. We need to separate all this stuff so we can style it a little bit better. And let's see, I want to have at the top the image and some basic info displayed together. So let's have another div here. And inside of this div, we want to show an image tag. And then we can set the source. We can set that to, we're going to need to grab if we look in here, we have sprites. Then we have something called other. This says we're gonna use the stripes. Those are different type of images. Let's see, other. We can set the home. I think looks pretty good, and use the front default and display this image here. So they have different types, but let's grab the sprites. Let's destructure stripes. Sprites. Right, sprites. And then here, let's use sprites dot others dot home dot front underscore default. And let's see here, front. I'm missing an O here. And I think it's just other, not others. There we go. All right, we got some images. So let's see abilities again. We went to sprites, right? This is where we are. We went to other, we went to home, and we using the front default. All right, this is this one. Here, React is giving you a warning to use a alt tag. We're just gonna use the name here. So get rid of that warning. In case the image doesn't show, we can show the name of the Pokemon. And what else we're gonna have here? Let's do a class. Well, actually, let's set the class right next here. Class name. And let's just have a Width of dash, we can set default custom size to using square brackets and then 200 pixels. So it can be a little bit smaller so we can work with this a little better. Then you can set the size to whatever you like. And then right next to that, I want to, inside of this div, right, so this div, I want to, right after that, let's have another div. This div in here is going to have some basic information. So let's actually say just p tag basic info. Okay. And then after this one, we can set the height. So p tag, let me just copy this down. I'm getting a little bit lazy. So here, let's have height. We're gonna display the height in here, and then here we're gonna set the weight. We're gonna display the weight. So let's destructure those values from details. Say weight, and also I want to get the height. Oh, come on. Okay, so here let's display the height 6 and the weight. Cool. So I want to display those right next to each other. So on this div, which is wrapping the image and is wrapping this div, we want to add a class name of flex. Put it right next to each other. Now let's do items dash center. And then let's create a border for the car. Let's see. Yeah, let's create a border. And then we're gonna have the border color. So border, come on, to dash yellow dash 300. This needs to be a dash. And let's set the border to border. Let's make the border bigger. So we can do border dash 2. And then we can also do padding dash 5 if we want. There we go. What else do we want here? Let's see if we want. What else? Okay, I think that's fine for now. To this div here, well, we have the information, the basic info. Let's just have a margin left dash auto, and then we can do a font dash bold to the whole thing. Then we can size this whole car, we could set it, but we'll do that in a second. Let's just finish up the image here. So let's see what else we want here. Let's add on the border here, after the padding, let's set this width dash to full. So later you can take all the space available. Let's have some shadow or box shadow to 2XL. At the bottom, whoops, dash XL, there we go. And then the shadow, I want to make it yellow dash 500, a little bit darker. All right, that's all I want to do here for the image. So this one closes all the way here. Let me see what else do I want here. So now that we have some info, let's go right after the image. And let's display some images, some different sprites at the bottom. Let's have another div here. Let's put a comment here. These are the, let's just call this one sprites. And then here, let's just have a image tag, which we're gonna set the source to sprites dot front underscore default. There we go, is down here at the bottom. And then let's set the alt to name. And let's see what else. Let's copy this down because we want 2, 3, 4, and then here we want, what is it screaming about? Must have an old prop alt. Oh, I put ATL. It's alt. Alt. If you're wondering how I did that, you can highlight or double click something and hold Control D, so you can grab all the instances of the same thing, right? And then you can change all of them at the same time. So here, instead of sprite.front default, we're gonna do back. So here in the second one, let's do back. We got the one in the back here. You can see again all these images here in the sprites object, and then you can see the back default, front default, and then we can use the shiny. This is a shiny one, so front shiny. Whoops. Instead of default, let's just change this to shiny. I think it is shiny, and then shiny back. So back underscore shiny. There we go. So in here, let's just flex this div. So class name equals flex. So we just have everything in a single line. Display down here. Cool. Let's see what else we need here. So let's see, to this main div, I want to see, no, that's fine. I'm trying to organize all these divs. So down here after the sprites, what else are we going to show here? Let's show the types. We still have to show types. Make a comment. We also going to show abilities. Make that a comment. We also going to show the forms. Not forms, but forms. There we go. Cool. Let's work on these so we can finish this up. So in the types here, let's wrap all of this in a div. So I'm gonna cut this, create a div, and then go inside the div, paste that again so we can put all of that together. And after types, let's just have its own div, because here I want to make sure they display separately. So in the side of this div here, we're going to let's see, what can we do here? Actually, we don't need to do it inside. Let's just display this and say, let's just type types in here. And then right under that, we can just have curly brackets. Let's destructure types, because types, if we save that, types is going to be, where is this object at? Types is going to be an array, which this Pokemon could have many different types. So we have one object of one type and then fire. I mean, this is types, yeah, types. So in here, we're gonna map over types. We're gonna grab each type, And for each type, we want to return a, let's just have a div, make this easy. And then inside of that div, let's display type that name. Fire. Yeah, if you can see, we need to do types is our variable, but then there's another type property here inside of this object. There's another type property and then name. So it's kind of nested, but it's easier to read here. So we're gonna do the same with the abilities. So let me copy. Actually, let's set a class name here. And let's just make this font dash bold. So I can copy this div, put one here, put another one here. And then instead of types, abilities, not all caps, but, and then here I want to say forms. So let's also bring in the, after types, we can bring abilities, lowercase a, and let's also bring in forms. All right, here we go. We're gonna grab this right over here. So now with the structure abilities and forms, so now we can do the same here. We can map over abilities, that map, we're gonna grab each ability and we're going to render a div which is gonna show the ability, that ability, that name is pretty much the same thing as the type name. Let's double check. Abilities, blaze, solar power, and then to the form we can do the same thing here. So forms, that map, I'm gonna grab each form should return a div with the form that name. I think on this one, let me see, is the form that form? No, that's not it here. Forms, open it up, forms that name. So forms, form that name on this one. All right, so right now we have the types, the abilities, and the forms. So in here, all we need to do is in this div that we're wrapping all of these here. So we just putting all of these things together. So here we could add a class name of, let's use flex again, but then we're going to say justify dash around, so we can add some space around. And then let me see, how is this looking? Should we set this to flex dash call? No, that will put it back to what we had. So let's see, flex justify around, we can do to some space. Let's add some margin to the top, dash 5, and let's see, should we do that here? And let's see, let's leave it a flex dash call again. I think we should wrap everything so we can make this a little bit smaller and make it look like like a car. And let's see what we can do here. Let's scroll to the top here. And let's see, we have the main here. Let's add some classes here. So to this div, let's add a border. Let's add, well, border -4. Let's add a padding of 10. Let's add the border -yellow -300. And then what else we can do here? Let's set the width to just be 500. Let's make this smaller so we can see the whole entire car. If I can grab this. Come on, there we go. Okay, so that's cool here. What else do I want to do here? Let's set the height to, we could leave it like that, or you can set it to something like 600. No, that's too little. Well, if we display this, I think, yeah, let's leave it like that because I want to display this in a row. So I'm gonna remove that in a second, or fix that in a second. Let's make this rounded. Rounded. Let me see. Rounded. Did that work? Yeah, it is rounded for the edges, so it can look more like a car. Let's add some margin top and bottom. So margin y-10. And let's add a background -gradient -2 that start from left to right. So we can say BG gradient -2R, or to right. We're gonna start from a red -300. And we're going to end up at, so we're gonna say 2-red -500 should be okay. Or the other way around if you want. If you want to start from 500 and end up at 300, it's up to you. Whatever you like. I think this car needs to be a little bit wider. But we don't even need to set this if we want. Yeah, that's fine. Let's keep it like that. Cool. So now it's starting to look a little bit more like a little car, Pokemon car. Let's see what else we need to start here before we finish up. So in the name, we already have some flex and margin bottom, capitalize, font, bold, text, margin left. To the HP here, to the spawn, let's just do font -bold. And we need to put that into a class name, of course. We don't have one. Uppercase. There we go. That's fine. We could make this, that's a spawn, experience, HP. Actually, we want this here after this here. 62. And then what if we make this text -black? I think it's more readable. If you think it's more readable, you can leave it like that. Up to you. So we got the name, HP, and then what else? We have the image. So I think the only thing we need to probably fix down here, let me see if I have everything else. Let's just work on setting the abilities here. Let's say stick it off from the column, and then let's do justify around, or let's say justify dash in between. Okay, so maybe let's see how we can fix this here so it can look more like a car. So in here, so at the bottom here, let's go with what I want to do first. We have a div here. Let's wrap all of these inside of a div so we can control these a little bit better. Like this. Let's see if we wrap this also. Let me just cut that. Have a div. Paste it there. Close it up. Cut this out again. Like so. Paste it again. Wrap it into a div. And close this up here. Cool. So if we want to make this a little bit longer, we could, so we can make it more like a car, but I leave that to you. So let's just go back a bit and say, let's say we click on this one just to make sure we're loading everything correctly, so we can see the type, changes to grass, poison, abilities, form. Go back again, click on another one. We can see those different sprites. Go back again and click on another one if you want. Here we go. You can make this text maybe if you want black a little bit because it looks like pretty plain. If you want to fix that, let's go back to the Pokemon list. And now let's go back to app, and instead of slimming this to 10, let's put that like 100. Let's see how it looks. There we go. Now we fetching 100 different ones, so let's pick some other ones here. Here we go. We see the name, basic info, we see the sprites and the abilities. Here we can add some more color on the where is this here in the details. We can go to Pokemon details here. We can set a class name. Let's just set this to font dash bold. The back button is right over here. Let's add to the link here. If we want, we can also do class name, also font and dash bold, and then let's do text and dash yellow dash 300 so you have a different color. We can also do border -2, and then padding -2 so it can be more like a button. Let's add margin Y, top and bottom -2 or 5, top and bottom X. No, yeah, I want here. It's not working properly. Let's leave it like this. We can add, I think is because the link is better to wrap it into a div, but we don't have to do that. We could go and put some margin top here, -2, margin top dash, let's just add -5, see how it looks. There we go. And then go back to app.js. We don't even need this code sandbox h1. So in here, the only thing I want to do, let's call this poke app. Let's just call it poke app. And then also in here, let's set this h1. Let's do a class name. We're just doing the finishing touches now because now we got the Pokemon car created. Let's add this a font dash bold. Pokemon app. Let's add a margin bottom -5. Let's add a text -4XL. And then what else we can do here? margin bottom. Let's add more. Let's make it just like 10. There we go. And then right next to that, actually let's wrap this into a div because I want to put something together here. All right, let's close that div. And right after that, let's bring in at the top, let's import curly brackets from React, curly quotes, React icons. I want to search for this bowl here, the CG Pokemon here. So we can copy this name, go back here, paste it here. And I think we need to do /CG so we can show this Pokemon bowl here, CG, like so. And then we want to have the size to, let's make that 50 something, like 52. And to this div, let's make this class name. It's running a little slow here, but let's just set this to flex. And then to the Pokemon bowl here, let's add a class name and set that to text dash yellow dash, let's just do 300, and let's do an animate dash bounce like so. We can have that there. So if we go back, we can see the name of the app, choose your Pokemon. You can click on your Pokemon. You see the loading logo for a few seconds. You can see the back button, Pokemon details. Pokemon details, we can have colon here if you want. Then you can see the car. You can see all the information that we listing for the different Pokemon. And that's about it. That's everything I want to cover on this app. So for this application, we cover how to use React Router DOM. So how to just set it up, basically the setting it up and using the use params and the link tag for most of the application. We also work on looking at the documentation on the Poke API, so hopefully you feel more comfortable into diving into and searching for different endpoints that you have here. We also added some Tailwind CSS and React icons to see how everything works, and we put together a mini application where you can check and data about your Pokemons and see some information about them. So I hope you like this video, and that's it for this one. I'll see you on the next one.